We want to bring you some breaking news out of Minneapolis. The attorney for Derek Chauvin has filed a motion for a new trial following his conviction for the murder of George Floyd last month. Chauvin's attorney, Eric Nelson, alleges that Chauvin's ability to have a fair trial was affected by pretrial publicity and that the court abused its discretion by denying requests for a change in venue. The motion also alleges juror misconduct. A photo recently surfaced of a juror, Brandon Mitchell, at a march on Washington last August, where members of George Floyd's family spoke. He was also seen wearing a T-shirt that says, "Get your knee off our necks." Mitchell has said he went to the march because he had never been to D.C. and he felt it was a good opportunity to be part of something. We will continue to follow this story and update you as we learn more. Meanwhile, it's been exactly 2 weeks since Ma'Khia Bryant, a black teenage girl, was killed by police in Columbus, Ohio. Ma'Khia was 16 and a typical teenager. She posed and danced on TikTok, and she made videos showing how to do different natural hairstyles. I can relate to that. She was also in foster care and lived in a group home. On April 20th, a police officer responding to a 911 call found several people in an altercation outside a home. Police say Ma'Khia had a knife, and that video shows her trying to stab 2 people before the officer fired 4 times, killing Ma'Khia. She was killed just minutes before Derek Chauvin was convicted of murdering George Floyd. But as journalist Fabiola Cineas writes in Vox, the reaction to Bryant's killing is very different from George Floyd's. After watching the short police body cam video, many people of different races and political affiliations decided that Ma'Khia was, quote, the aggressor, and, quote, a fat, huge, knife-wielding attacker and maniac. Some crisis response experts said de-escalation tactics like commanding Bryant to drop the weapon could have worked and kept everyone alive. But even though Ma'Khia's funeral was held this past Friday, her name is no longer trending. All of this goes to show that our narratives surrounding police violence often center on black cis men, leaving out black girls, women, and transgender people. Fabiola Cineas joins us now. Thank you so much for being here again.
Thank you so much for having me, Zelina.
So lay out for us why the outcry over Ma'Khia's killing wasn't as strong as others. We know the names of black men killed by police, and often the women and girls do not get the same attention.
Yeah, there are so many reasons why Ma'Khia Bryant's name is still not trending, or why it stopped trending. But the main reason is because she was a young black girl. And so many experts I've talked to have talked to me about how young black women, black girls just have to face so much extra to be seen as the perfect victim. So the fact that they're facing sexism, the fact that their blackness is working against them, those two identities really compound to create an atmosphere where they're less likely to be believed. And in Ma'Khia's case, we know that black girls deal with adultification bias, which is this idea that as young as the age of 5, one study found black girls are viewed as adults. They're viewed as people who are more mature, they're less innocent. And so that means that they're less deserving of care and protection. And so that was definitely at play in Ma'Khia's fatal death at the hands of the police.
I mean, you saw so many different comments, people commenting on her physical appearance, her physical size, and the perception that somehow, she's not as, quote, innocent because of those factors. The other piece is that people were blaming her for her own death. So she is holding a knife in the video and the clip that we've seen, but she's also the one who called the police. And so there's obvious questions we don't know the answer to. Why are black girls and women seen as being responsible for when someone else hurts them?
Yeah, it's just this same exact idea of this goes back to slavery, as I write in the piece, that black women are kind of viewed as people who are to blame. They're viewed as the people who are the aggressors. They're viewed as the people who need to be harmed. They're people who shouldn't be protected. And so a lot of that just goes back to how black female slaves were just maimed and beaten and raped to kind of just keep slavery going. And so these same stereotypes have just become embedded in our culture. They're embedded in our laws. And so when a black woman dies at the hands of the police, the question is just, what did she do in order to receive this kind of treatment. We saw this with Sandra Bland when there was a traffic stop. Right, people said that she was too combative, so she should have just complied with the police, and therefore she would have never died. We even saw this with Breonna Taylor. Breonna Taylor was asleep when people broke into her home and when the police started shooting, and they even said Breonna Taylor should not have been dating a drug dealer who, created the connection between her and this kind of drug raid that the police were trying to do. And so it's always this question first of like, what did she do to bring this upon herself? And so in the case of Ma'Khia, why did she have that knife? Why did she reach for the knife? Instead of questioning this broader system of policing that we're talking about every day now.
I mean, I think that it's so nuanced in a lot of ways when we're talking about the difference in treatment between cases of Black men and Black women. But one of the things I also think is that I haven't seen a video quite like this one with a white girl, like a white teenage girl. Now, pre-insurrection, I could have said that broadly, but because of the insurrection, we did see a white grown woman who was about to jump over the door into the Senate hall, right outside the House, in that hallway there where there were members of Congress and leadership, and she was shot, Ashley Babbitt. But what's ironic is, there are folks that are like very sympathetic to Ashley Babbitt and her circumstance when she was engaged in a violent insurrection, when lethal force was used against her. But in this case, we're talking about a 16-year-old girl. Why aren't de-escalation tactics seen as necessary when dealing with Black children, frankly? Because that's what we're talking about in this context.
Yeah, I think the very problem with this case and with so many other cases like Ma'Khia's is that her very Blackness is viewed as the weapon. So even if Ma'Khia didn't have a knife, right, there's a chance that she could have still been shot down. And I think that there are so many cases where people are like, we're always just like, why don't they shoot in the leg? Why don't they shoot in a way to do something different? But I think in this specific case, it's still, again, just Ma'Khia's identity as a young Black girl. And so I talked to some crisis interventionists, and they basically said that they've broken up fights between young Black kids who had knives, who had bricks, who had other just sharp objects. I myself am a former teacher. I've broken up some fights. And there are just ways to treat these people as human because they're still actually, right, trying to become those adults that we all want them to be. And so, unfortunately, in the case of Ma'Khia Bryant and other little Black girls, they don't get that chance or that opportunity to be kids and learn and get to understand what it means to resolve conflict in a way that is not going to harm others.
Let me tell you, I lived with two teachers in my early 20s, and let me tell you, they broke up some fights that were worse than the one that we saw on that video. The other piece of this is another nuanced piece, and that's the body shaming that happened in this particular case. So people saw this video, and they started commenting on the fact that Ma'Khia must have deserved this because she's not thin. How do we get there? What world is that happening in?
Yeah, I think the most horrendous thing that I saw was just someone saying that because Ma'Khia is fat, that means that the police, didn't have a chance to really understand whether she was a kid or an adult, or weight somehow makes you older mysteriously and magically. And so just the fat phobia is real, right? It just became another way to blame Ma'Khia for her situation, another way to prove and say that she was undeserving of love and care and understanding in that moment. And so the fat phobia, especially when it comes to Black women, it just goes hand in hand with the misogynoir and just other kinds of just complex identities that Black girls and women are dealing with.
Last week, we had a conversation with Dr. Stacey Patton about the foster care system, and you also write about that aspect of this case. And the public really isn't talking much about the systemic racism in the foster care system, which disproportionately impacts Black children. So why should we be focusing on that aspect of this and how that contributed to what happened to Ma'Khia?
Yeah, there's still so many questions that haven't been answered publicly about why Ma'Khia was in the foster care system, but I don't really know that those questions matter. I think what matters is the data that we do have, which is that several calls were made over the past couple of months from Ma'Khia's foster home, where her and her sibling apparently were making phone calls for help to the police. So this was clearly a situation where the people living there were like, we need help. And so this could have been a situation where help could have come in a different form, right? Not in the form of a police officer coming to handle an altercation, but help in the form of someone actually trying to pay attention to what's happening in the house and just giving resources that were probably necessary in that situation.
That's just gutting, especially because this is a 16-year-old child and she is not coming back. And there are still all of these questions that need to be answered so this never happens ever again. Fabiola Cineas, thank you so much for being here. Really important conversation. Please stay safe. Hi, I'm Zerlina Maxwell. Thanks for checking out our channel on YouTube. You can see more from Zerlina by clicking any of the videos on this screen, and make sure you subscribe below to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. Thanks for watching.